My wife looked at me one Tuesday morning in January 2019 and said, "I don't know who you are anymore." And the terrifying part was, I didn't either. I was 71 years old. I had 43 years of work behind me. I had built something real, something that mattered, had people who depended on me, had a title on a door and a reason to get dressed in the morning. And then one Friday afternoon in October 2017, all of that disappeared. Not gradually, not kindly. One day I was someone. The next day I was standing in my kitchen at 9 a.m. in the same clothes I'd worn to bed, watching my wife leave for a yoga class I hadn't known she'd signed up for. And I realized I had nowhere to be, and no idea who was supposed to show up there anyway. What I didn't know then, and what took me the better part of 3 years to understand, is that what I was going through wasn't weakness. It wasn't a character flaw. It wasn't even depression, though it wore depression's face for a long time. What it was, and I want you to hear this carefully, was a biological collapse. Your brain, this extraordinary machine you've been running for 50 or 60 or 70 years, doesn't actually separate who you are from what you do. There is research out of the University of Michigan that I stumbled onto about 2 years after retirement that made me cry at my kitchen table because it explained everything. When your occupational identity disappears, the neural pathways that carry your sense of self, the structures that literally answer the question, "Who am I?" they go quiet. Not metaphorically quiet, neurologically quiet. Your brain is searching for a signal and finding static. That's not weakness, that's biology. But here's the part nobody tells you. That collapse moves in stages, and most people, I mean this, most people get permanently stuck at stage 2. They never make it out. And the cost of staying stuck isn't just emotional. I'll come back to that. The first thing that happens, and this hits usually within weeks of leaving work, is what I'd call the relief phase. You feel it like putting down a heavy bag you've been carrying for 20 years. Gary, a guy I used to work with in manufacturing, retired at 64 after 31 years running a production floor in Ohio. He told me the first 3 weeks felt like the best vacation of his life. His blood pressure dropped. He slept until 7. He and his wife, Janet, drove up to Vermont and stayed at a little inn they'd been meaning to visit since 1998. He said, "I finally felt like myself." And I remember thinking, that's the cruelest part of all this, because it feels like freedom right before it starts feeling like falling. Because what comes next, and it comes for almost everyone, usually somewhere between week 4 and month 3, is the silence. And I don't mean the kind of silence that's peaceful. I mean the silence where you realize the structure that held your identity together is completely gone, and you don't have anything to replace it. You reach for who you are, and your hand closes around air. Gary told me that by February of that first year, he was waking up at 5 in the morning anyway, out of habit, and just lying there. Janet would still be asleep. The house was dark, and he said he'd lay there thinking, what is today even for? He started watching television, hours of it, He gained 11 pounds by spring. He stopped calling his friends from work because, and this is the part that breaks my heart when I think about it, because he felt like he didn't have anything interesting to say anymore. Like he'd lost the currency of conversation along with the job. That's stage 2. And it is brutal. And it can last months. It can last years. I've met men and women who are 5, 6, 7 years out of their careers and still living there. Still in that gray corridor between who they were and who they haven't figured out how to become. The retirement depression that nobody warned them about. The loss of identity after work that nobody named for them. Because we are very good in this culture at celebrating retirement. We throw parties, we give plaques, we say congratulations, and then we completely abandon people in the actual experience of it. There is something I need to tell you about men specifically. Because if you are a man watching this, or if you love one, you need to understand what the numbers say. Men over 60 are the loneliest demographic in the developed world. That is not my opinion. That is documented. And the reason is not mysterious. Men build their social world almost entirely around professional structure. The friendships aren't really friendships in the traditional sense. They're professional adjacencies. You see each other because the calendar puts you in the same building. When the building disappears, the relationships disappear with it. And most men, because of the way we were raised, because of everything we absorbed about what strength looks like, will not tell anyone they are lonely. They will tell you they are fine. They will say they're keeping busy. They'll tinker with things. They'll watch sports. And inside, they are slowly disappearing. I almost did. I want to be honest about that. The year after I retired, I had 5 or 6 conversations of real substance with another human being. Total, for the year. My wife was there, obviously, but, and this is where I need to talk about something people don't want to say out loud, retirement is the single greatest stress test a long marriage will ever face. I've been married 47 years. I love my wife in a way I couldn't have understood when I was young. But when I retired and was suddenly home all the time, suddenly in her space, suddenly structureless and anxious and not quite myself, it nearly broke us. Not because of dramatic events, because of the slow erosion of 2 people trying to share a life that had been designed around one of them being absent for 10 hours a day. She had a whole world while I was working, a rhythm, routines that were hers, and I walked into that world like a confused guest who didn't know the rules and didn't want to admit he was lost. The thing that saved our marriage, honestly, was a conversation we had in the spring of 2019, where she finally said it plainly. She said, "You need to find out who you are again, not who you were, who you are now. Because I fell in love with a person who knew himself, and right now, I don't think you do." That landed hard, but she was right. She was completely right. Which brings me to what I now understand as stage 3. And this is where the path either opens up or closes for good. Stage 3 is the identity audit, and it is not comfortable. It requires you to sit with a very difficult question, which is, what did work actually give you that you are mourning? Because most people, when they feel the loss, assume they are mourning the work itself, the role, the status. But when I started being honest, brutally honest, I realized I wasn't mourning the actual work at all. I was mourning the feeling of being needed, the clarity of knowing what mattered today, the sense that I was contributing something, the identity that came from being the person other people depended on. And once you separate those things, once you realize what you're actually grieving, you can start to ask a different question. Not, how do I get back what I lost? But, where else can I find what I actually need? I had a neighbor, Margaret, 68, retired teacher, 34 years in a primary school in Connecticut. She retired, and within 6 months she was genuinely unwell, anxious, withdrawn, had stopped tending the garden she'd spent 20 years building. Her daughter called me once. She knew I was going through something similar and asked if I'd talk to her mom. When Margaret and I finally sat down, she told me the thing she missed most was the moment in the afternoon when a child who had been struggling with something finally understood it. That specific moment, the light that came on in a face. She didn't miss the lesson planning. She didn't miss the staff meetings or the parent emails. She missed that specific experience of witnessing someone understand something for the first time. And I asked her, where else in the world does that experience exist? And I watched her face change. Within 3 months, she was volunteering twice a week at a literacy program for adult immigrants. And she told me recently that some Tuesday afternoons she drives home feeling better than she did on the best days of her teaching career. Not the same, different, but just as real. That is what stage 3 looks like when it works. You stop trying to recreate the old identity, and you start locating the actual needs that identity was serving. Now I need to talk about something that almost nobody addresses, and it is causing a quiet catastrophe in families across this country and in Britain. When we lose our professional identity, when we're in that stage 2 fog looking for something to hold on to, many of us turn to our adult children, and I understand it completely. I did a version of it myself. There is a pull, an almost gravitational pull, toward being needed by your kids again, calling more than they want to hear from you, offering help they didn't ask for, inserting yourself into lives that have been quite naturally, quite healthily constructed around your absence. And what happens, what I've watched happen in family after family, is that the parent begins to unconsciously treat an adult child as a replacement purpose, and the child can feel it. They can feel the weight of it, and it strains the relationship in ways that are very hard to repair later. Your children are not your next chapter. They are separate people who love you and who also need you not to need them too much. That boundary is not cruelty, it is love. And drawing it for yourself is one of the most important things you can do for that relationship. Here is the piece about the brain that I promised I'd come back to. because this is the one that changed everything for me. When you are in stage 2, that prolonged identity fog, your brain is not just emotionally suffering, it is physically at risk. Researchers at Harvard and at Edinburgh both have data suggesting that prolonged social isolation and purposelessness in older adults accelerates cognitive decline. The brain requires novelty. It requires the challenge of learning new roles, new skills, new ways of being. When those inputs disappear, neuroplasticity decreases. The connections that keep us sharp begin to thin. This is not guaranteed fate. This is reversible. Actively building a new identity after retirement, genuinely engaging with who you are becoming, is one of the most powerful things you can do to protect your brain. Not crossword puzzles, not supplements, identity reconstruction, learning a new role. That creates neuroplasticity in a way that passive activity simply does not. When I heard that, something clicked that I hadn't expected. Reinventing yourself at 50, at 60, at 70 is not self-indulgence. It is not midlife crisis dressed up in better clothes. It is actually how you protect your mind. Finding purpose after 50 is, on a neurological level, how you stay yourself. Which brings me to stage 4, and this is the one that matters most, the one I wish someone had handed to me like a map on the day I cleared out my office. Stage 4 is not discovery. It's not some dramatic awakening. It's quieter than that, and it's more practical. It is assignment. You stop waiting to feel like someone, and you decide to try being someone. On purpose, as an experiment, with a specific timeline. Here is what that looked like for me. In the fall of 2019, after 2 years of being stuck, I sat down and wrote out one sentence. For the next 90 days, I am going to be a person who builds furniture and teaches other people how to. That's it. I had done some woodworking decades before, had the tools still in my garage, had never done anything with them. I signed up to teach a Saturday morning class at a community workshop in town. I told people that was what I did now. I introduced myself that way. And something strange happened almost immediately. My brain accepted it. Not because I had found my calling, not because furniture was the meaning of my life, but because I had given my nervous system something to organize itself around. A role, a structure, a reason the day had a shape. The 90 days mattered. The time limit mattered, because it made it feel safe to try. You're not committing to a new identity forever. You're running a pilot. If it doesn't fit, you run another one. I know a woman in her late 60s, Patricia, who tried 3 different 90-day experiments before she found the one that stuck. She tried ceramics, hated it. She tried a book club, felt flat. Third try was volunteering with a hospice organization, sitting with people in their final weeks, and she told me that she finally understood why nothing else had fit. because she had spent her whole career as a social worker, walking toward the hardest thing in the room, and she had been trying to retire into comfort when her nature required she keep walking toward the hard thing. That was her identity, not her job title, her orientation toward difficulty. You have that. Your identity is not your title. It is your orientation, the way you are built to move through the world. And it is still there, waiting, even after everything you used to hang it on has disappeared. I am 74 years old. I have watched friends not make it through stage 2. I have watched brilliant people, capable people, people who built real things and raised good families. I've watched them spend their final decade in a gray fog, retired but not living, alive but not present. And I can't fix that. But I can tell you that if you are in that fog right now, if you are somewhere in that stage 2 corridor and you can feel the weight of it, you are not broken. Your brain is doing exactly what a brain does when its identity signal goes quiet. You are not weak for feeling lost. You are biological. And the path out is not backward. It is not a return to what was. It is assignment. 1 sentence, 90 days. Try being someone on purpose and see what your brain does with it. The cost of not doing it. I want to leave you with this number. Researchers estimate that prolonged purposelessness after retirement can subtract up to 8 years of cognitive health. 8 years. That is not nothing. That is not a rounding error. That is 8 years of knowing who you are, 8 years of being present for the people you love, 8 years of actually living inside your own life. You still have time I didn't know I had. Use it differently than I used mine. If this landed somewhere real for you, drop a comment below and tell me where you are in all of this. Because the conversation we're not having is the one that costs us the most. And if you want more of these, subscribe. I put something new out every week, and I am only getting started.